Narendra Modi was born on 17 September 1950 in Vadnagar, a small railway town in Gujarat, marked by temples, markets, and strong traditional routines. His early environment was modest and disciplined, shaped by daily work, community interaction, and limited resources. From the beginning, life demanded effort rather than comfort. He was born into a family of modest means, where his father, Damodar Das Mulchand Modi, ran a small tea stall near the Vadnagar railway station. His mother, Hiraben Modi, lived a life of simplicity, discipline, and deep religious faith. From his parents, Modi absorbed the values of hard work, frugality, and endurance. As a child, Narendra Modi helped his father sell tea, learning early how to interact with people from different backgrounds and temperaments. Standing at the railway station exposed him to travelers, conversations, and the wider world beyond his town. This daily exposure quietly shaped his confidence in public interaction. Vadnagar's social life was deeply connected to culture, religion, and routine discipline, and Modi grew up participating in festivals, prayers, and local activities. He showed early interest in debate, reading, and public speaking, often questioning ideas rather than accepting them silently. Curiosity became a habit rather than a phase. His formal schooling took place in Vadnagar, where teachers described him as focused, sharp, and deeply attentive during discussions. He was not known for luxury or privilege, but for persistence and strong memory. Learning was treated as responsibility, not entertainment. Even in childhood, Modi showed attraction towards discipline, organization, and structured thinking. He participated in youth activities that emphasized service, physical effort, and order. These early habits would later define his lifestyle choices. The town of Vadnagar also carried historical depth, which quietly influenced Modi's sense of identity and continuity. Living among stories of history, struggle, and tradition strengthened his respect for roots. Identity began forming before ambition. This phase of Modi's life was ordinary in appearance but strict in discipline. A boy was learning endurance, public interaction, and self-control without knowing where it would lead. The foundations of a demanding journey were being laid quietly. Narendra Modi came into contact with structured ideological discipline during his teenage years when he was introduced to the Rashtriya Swayamsevak Sangh, commonly known as the RSS. The organization emphasized physical discipline, nationalism, character building, and selfless service, values that resonated deeply with his temperament. This exposure marked the beginning of a lifelong association. As a young participant, Modi attended daily shakhas where routine, order, and teamwork were central. These gatherings focused on physical exercise, ideological discussion, and collective responsibility rather than personal gain. The environment appealed to his desire for structure and purpose. During this period, Modi was formally married at a young age following social customs of the time, but he soon chose a path of separation from household life. He decided not to enter family responsibilities, believing that personal detachment was necessary for service-oriented work. This decision reflected an early willingness to sacrifice personal comfort. In his late teens, Modi left home and began years of travel across India, often living with minimal resources. He visited places of religious, cultural, and historical importance, observing social realities firsthand. These journeys broadened his understanding of India's diversity and hardship. During this time, he studied independently, reading books on politics, history, spirituality, and leadership. Without formal guidance, he built a habit of self-education and disciplined routine. Learning became self-driven rather than institutional. By the early 1970s, Modi returned to organizational work with deeper conviction and maturity. The RSS recognized his commitment and ability to organize, communicate, and endure demanding schedules. Responsibility gradually increased without ceremony. He was later appointed as a pracharak, a full-time worker of the RSS, a role that required complete dedication and detachment from personal life. As a pracharak, Modi lived simply, traveled extensively, and worked behind the scenes to strengthen organizational networks. This phase sharpened his discipline and communication skills. Life as a pracharak was demanding and often invisible, but it built resilience and ideological clarity. Modi learned to work without recognition, focusing on long-term goals rather than immediate reward. This mindset would shape his political approach later. This period ended Modi's formative years and prepared him for organized political life. He was no longer just a young volunteer, but a disciplined organizer shaped by ideology and experience. The path toward formal politics was beginning to open. Narendra Modi entered formal political life gradually during the late 1970s, not as a public speaker or candidate, but as a disciplined worker focused on organization and structure. He continued operating mostly behind the scenes, believing that political strength comes from preparation rather than visibility. This belief would remain central to his approach throughout life. One of the most defining experiences of this phase was the Indian emergency, when civil liberties were suspended and opposition voices were suppressed. During this period, Modi worked covertly, coordinating movement, communication, and safety for activists while avoiding arrest. Living under constant risk trained him in secrecy, discipline, and crisis management. The emergency deeply shaped Modi's political psychology. He later described it as a time when democratic systems can collapse without vigilance. This experience hardened his belief in strong organization and internal discipline. After the emergency ended in 1977, Indian politics entered a phase of realignment, and the Bharatiya Janata Party began rebuilding its national presence. Modi was formally assigned to party work, moving fully into political organization rather than ideological training alone. He accepted this shift without seeking recognition. Throughout the 1980s, Modi worked intensively in Gujarat, focusing on strengthening grassroots networks and internal coordination. Politics became an exercise in logistics rather than speeches. Unlike many leaders, Modi rarely addressed large crowds during this phase. Instead, he concentrated on message discipline, voter mapping, and crisis response planning. This quiet work built trust among senior leaders. By the mid-1980s, Modi had developed a reputation as a problem solver who could operate under pressure. He was often sent into difficult regions where organization was weak or conflict was high. Success was measured internally, not publicly. His ability to manage communication brought him closer to national leaders, including L.K. Advani, during major political campaigns. Modi worked on coordination, planning, and narrative discipline rather than stage presence. He studied how political momentum is built and sustained. During this time, Modi also learnt the importance of media management. He observed how messaging could shape public perception long before elections. Control of narrative became a strategic priority. By the late 1980s, Modi was no longer seen as just an ideological worker. He had become a professional political strategist with deep understanding of organization, communication, and electoral mechanics. His rise was silent but steady. This phase built the foundation of Modi's political identity. He learnt that power is constructed patiently through systems, not sudden popularity. The transition from organizer to administrator was now approaching.
Narendra Modi moved to the national stage in the 1990s when the Bharatiya Janata Party called him to work at its central headquarters in New Delhi. This shift placed him closer to national leadership, major election strategies, and long-term political planning. For Modi, this was not promotion by popularity but by organizational trust. At the national headquarters, Modi worked quietly on coordination, communication frameworks, and campaign logistics across multiple states. He was involved in structuring election schedules, aligning state units, and ensuring message discipline from top to bottom. This period sharpened his understanding of national-scale politics. One of his most visible responsibilities came during the large-scale political movement led by L.K. Advani, where Modi handled planning, routing, crowd coordination, and internal communication. While leaders addressed crowds, Modi focused on ensuring that the machinery behind the scenes never failed. This experience taught him how mass politics is sustained through precision. During the late 1990s, Gujarat faced internal instability within the state government, marked by leadership changes and declining administrative confidence. The central leadership of the BJP began searching for a figure who could impose discipline, rebuild organization, and restore control. Narendra Modi's name emerged not because of electoral fame, but because of administrative reputation. In 2001, following the resignation of Keshubhai Patel, the party made a decisive and risky choice. Narendra Modi, who had never contested a legislative election, was appointed Chief Minister of Gujarat. The decision surprised both supporters and critics. Taking office during a period of uncertainty, Modi faced immediate pressure to prove administrative ability rather than ideological loyalty. He approached governance with the same discipline he had learnt as an organizer, focusing on systems, timelines, and accountability. Early decisions reflected urgency rather than caution. Soon after taking charge, Gujarat was struck by the devastating 2001 Bhuj earthquake, which tested the state administration under extreme conditions. Modi coordinated relief, rehabilitation, and reconstruction efforts while facing intense scrutiny. This period also introduced Modi to direct public leadership, media attention, and constant evaluation. He began developing a governance style that emphasized visibility, decisiveness, and centralized control. Administration replaced organization as his primary responsibility. Internally, Modi restructured bureaucratic functioning, demanding punctuality, reporting, and measurable outcomes. Officials were expected to deliver results within deadlines, regardless of political comfort. This approach quickly altered administrative culture. By the end of 2001, Narendra Modi had transformed from a behind-the-scenes strategist into a fully visible executive leader. Supporters sought discipline and direction, while critics questioned concentration of power. The next phase would test him under even greater pressure and controversy.
Narendra Modi entered the most defining and controversial phase of his career in 2002, when Gujarat faced one of the darkest periods in its modern history. This phase would shape his national image permanently, influencing how supporters and critics viewed his leadership. Nothing before had tested him at this scale. In February 2002, a train carrying Hindu pilgrims was set on fire at Godhra, resulting in the deaths of 59 people. The incident triggered widespread communal violence across Gujarat, leading to loss of life, displacement, and destruction of property. The state administration faced overwhelming breakdown under sudden mass unrest. As Chief Minister, Modi came under immediate national and international scrutiny regarding the state's response. Critics accused the government of delayed action and administrative failure, while supporters argued the situation escalated beyond immediate control. The crisis turned governance into a moral and political battlefield. The central government deployed the army, imposed curfews and initiated relief operations to stabilize the situation. Investigations, commissions and legal proceedings followed over the years, keeping the issue alive in public discourse. Modi's leadership was now permanently linked to this moment. Politically, many expected Modi's career to end during this period. Instead of retreating, he chose confrontation, calling early elections and placing his leadership directly before voters. This decision transformed crisis into a political referendum. In the 2002 Gujarat Assembly elections, Modi campaigned aggressively, emphasizing governance, identity and stability. The result ensured his political survival. After the elections, Modi focused on rebuilding state administration and economic confidence. He promoted infrastructure development, industrial investment, and centralized decision-making. Governance became his chosen narrative. Internationally, the controversy affected Modi's diplomatic engagement for several years. Some countries restricted official interaction, while global media scrutiny remained intense. Isolation became part of his political reality. Internally, Modi consolidated control within the Gujarat government and party structure. Dissent was reduced, decision-making became centralized, and authority was clearly defined. This period hardened his leadership style. By the mid-2000s, Modi had survived political collapse and emerged stronger within his party. The crisis reshaped him from an administrator into a polarizing national figure. The next phase would focus on economic branding and reinvention.
Narendra Modi began reshaping his political identity in the mid-2000s by shifting focus from controversy to governance, growth, and economic performance. He understood that long-term survival required measurable outcomes rather than ideological defense alone. Development became both strategy and shield. Modi promoted what later came to be known as the Gujarat Development Model, emphasizing infrastructure, electricity supply, road networks and industrial investment. The state invested heavily in ports, highways and power generation to attract private enterprise. Efficiency and speed were projected as administrative strengths. A key instrument of this strategy was the Vibrant Gujarat Summit, launched in 2003, which invited domestic and international investors. These summits were designed to signal stability, opportunity and political decisiveness. Modi positioned himself as a CEO-style administrator rather than a traditional politician. Critics questioned whether growth benefits were evenly distributed across social groups. Supporters pointed to improved electricity access, faster approvals, and investor confidence. The debate itself kept Gujarat at the center of national economic discussion. Within the state bureaucracy, Modi enforced strict timelines and accountability. Officials were evaluated on delivery rather than seniority, altering administrative culture. This approach strengthened central control but reduced procedural delays. Media strategy also evolved during this phase. Modi increasingly used direct communication, speeches, and controlled messaging to present a consistent development narrative. Image management became inseparable from governance. Electoral success reinforced this repositioning. Modi won repeated Gujarat Assembly elections, allowing continuity of policy and messaging. Stability became part of his brand. Gradually, national leaders within the BJP began viewing Modi as more than a state-level figure. His ability to convert controversy into electoral success attracted attention. A national role no longer seemed distant. By the early 2010s, Narendra Modi had redefined himself as a leader associated primarily with growth, decisiveness, and administrative speed. Whether praised or criticized, he dominated political conversation. The path toward national leadership was now clearly visible. Narendra Modi
entered the national spotlight decisively in the early 2010s, when growing dissatisfaction with economic slowdown and governance paralysis created space for an alternative narrative. Within the Bharatiya Janata Party, momentum built around projecting him as the face of change rather than relying on collective leadership. This decision marked a strategic break from tradition. In 2013, Modi was formally announced as the BJP's prime ministerial candidate, triggering intense national debate. Supporters framed him as a decisive administrator with a development record, while critics highlighted past controversies and governance style. The election became highly personalized around leadership choice. Modi's campaign strategy emphasized direct connection with voters through relentless travel and messaging discipline. He addressed hundreds of rallies across states, tailoring themes of development, corruption-free governance, and national pride. Scale and repetition created visibility unmatched by rivals. Technology played a central role in the campaign. Modi used social media, digital outreach, and innovative tools like 3D hologram addresses to reach multiple locations simultaneously. This approach signaled modernization of political communication. The campaign framed governance as performance, promising speed, accountability, and delivery. Slogans focused on jobs, infrastructure, and national confidence, contrasting sharply with incumbents' messaging. Narrative control became a core advantage. On 16 May 2014, election results delivered a decisive outcome, with the BJP securing a clear majority in the Lok Sabha. It was the first single-party majority in decades, reshaping India's coalition politics. Modi's leadership was now nationally legitimized. He was sworn in as Prime Minister of India on 26 May 2014 at a ceremony that emphasized diplomatic outreach by inviting regional leaders. The gesture signaled an intent to elevate India's regional presence from the outset. Symbolism accompanied authority. As Prime Minister, Modi centralized decision-making within the executive, emphasizing deadlines and monitoring. He sought to align ministries with clear targets, reflecting his administrative style from Gujarat. Governance was framed as mission-driven. Public expectations rose sharply following the victory. Supporters anticipated rapid transformation, while critics watched closely for policy substance. The transition from campaign to governance had begun. This phase transformed Modi from a state leader to a national executive with unprecedented mandate. The next challenge was converting political capital into policy outcomes. Delivery would define durability. Narendra Modi began his first term as Prime Minister by centralizing governance and emphasizing speed, visibility, and direct accountability. He believed that delay weakened authority, so ministries were pushed toward deadlines, reviews, and measurable targets. Decision-making became closely monitored from the top. One of the earliest and most visible initiatives was Swachh Bharat Abhiyan, launched in 2014, aimed at improving sanitation and public hygiene nationwide. The program relied heavily on public messaging, symbolism, and citizen participation rather than only administrative enforcement. Cleanliness was framed as both civic duty and national pride. Economic reform became another central pillar, with emphasis on formalization and financial inclusion. Schemes such as Pradhan Mantri Jan Dhan Yojana expanded access to bank accounts for millions. Technology was positioned as the bridge between state and citizen. In 2016, the government announced demonetization, withdrawing high-value currency notes from circulation. The move was described as an attack on black money and corruption, but it also caused widespread disruption and debate. The decision highlighted Modi's willingness to take high-risk policy steps. Foreign policy received unprecedented attention during this phase. Modi engaged directly with global leaders, emphasizing India's economic potential, strategic autonomy, and cultural identity. Frequent international visits increased India's diplomatic visibility. Relations with neighboring countries were highlighted symbolically, beginning with outreach to South Asian leaders at his swearing-in ceremony. At the same time, India pursued stronger ties with major powers, balancing diplomacy with assertiveness. Foreign policy became leader-centric. Domestically, Modi relied heavily on direct communication with citizens through speeches, radio addresses, and social media. This bypassed traditional intermediaries and strengthened personal connection with supporters. Political messaging remained tightly controlled. Critics argued that centralization weakened institutional independence and reduced space for dissent. Supporters countered that strong leadership was necessary to overcome inertia and corruption. Debate around governance style intensified. By the end of his first term, Modi had consolidated authority both within government and the ruling party. Policies had reshaped economic behavior and political expectations. The stage was set for another national verdict. Narendra Modi entered the 2019 general election carrying the weight of incumbency, high expectations, and a deeply polarized political environment. The campaign emphasized national security, leadership decisiveness, and continuity of governance rather than broad coalition compromise. Once again, the election centered strongly on his personal leadership. In May 2019, the BJP secured an even larger majority in the Lok Sabha than in 2014, reinforcing Modi's authority within government and party alike. The result reduced internal constraints and expanded executive confidence. For supporters, it confirmed trust. For critics, it raised concerns about unchecked power. Early in the second term, the government moved quickly on long-standing ideological and administrative goals. One of the most consequential decisions was the reorganization of Jammu and Kashmir in August 2019, which altered its constitutional status. The move was framed as national integration but sparked intense domestic and international debate. National security continued to dominate political narrative during this phase. Military actions and strong rhetoric were presented as evidence of a firmer posture toward external threats. Supporters viewed this as restored confidence, while critics warned of escalation risks. Economic challenges became more visible during the second term, including slowing growth and employment concerns. The government responded with structural reforms, stimulus measures, and messaging focused on long-term transformation. Economic debate became sharper and more contested. Social and political polarization intensified during this period. Government policies and rhetoric were seen by supporters as cultural assertion and by critics as exclusionary. Public discourse increasingly reflected ideological division rather than consensus. Communication strategy remained leader-centric, with Modi addressing the nation during moments of crisis or transition. Direct messaging reinforced his image as the primary decision-maker. Institutional voices became less visible in comparison. Despite criticism, Modi's control over party machinery and electoral narrative remained strong. Opposition struggled to match scale, coherence, and messaging discipline. Political dominance translated into legislative momentum. By the end of this phase, Modi had reshaped India's political culture toward personalization of power and policy. Leadership became the central axis of governance and debate. The final chapter would focus on legacy rather than mandate. Narendra Modi stands as one of the most influential and debated political figures in independent India, not because of a single policy, but because of the scale and intensity of his impact. His leadership reshaped how power is exercised, communicated, and contested in modern Indian democracy. Few leaders have left such a deep imprint on political culture itself. Modi's leadership style is defined by centralization, discipline, and personal accountability, with decisions flowing strongly from the top. Supporters see this as necessary strength in a complex nation, while critics argue it weakens institutional balance. Both views reflect the scale of change he introduced. His political journey from a small town in Gujarat to the highest executive office is often presented as a story of self-made rise. This narrative has inspired millions who identify with ambition shaped by discipline rather than privilege. At the same time, it has intensified emotional loyalty around leadership. Economically, Modi's years in power will be judged by long-term outcomes rather than immediate results. Structural reforms, infrastructure expansion, and formalization efforts created lasting shifts even as debate continues over distribution and impact. History will weigh intent against consequence. On the global stage, Modi elevated India's visibility and assertiveness, presenting the country as confident and self-directed. Diplomatic outreach and strategic positioning became leader-driven rather than institution-led. This altered how India is perceived internationally. Socially and politically, his tenure deepened ideological divisions while also mobilizing previously disengaged citizens. Participation increased, but consensus became harder to achieve. Polarization emerged as both consequence and strategy. Modi's relationship with public communication redefined political messaging in India. Direct addresses, symbolism, and narrative control replaced traditional intermediaries. Leadership became a continuous performance as well as responsibility. How history judges Narendra Modi will depend on time, distance, and outcomes still unfolding. Some will remember decisive leadership and national confidence. Others will recall controversy and concentration of power. Both memories will coexist. In the long arc of Indian history, Modi will likely be remembered as a leader who transformed the rules of politics itself. He did not merely govern within the system, he reshaped how the system responds to leadership. That transformation ensures his place in history, regardless of judgment.